Your Highness, thank you so much for this interview.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
We are talking while we are in Israel at the height of a very difficult war with terrorist organizations trying to basically destroy Israel. You know, on October 6, 2023, we were still treating each front separately. Now it is clear to us that they are all branches, proxies of the regime in Iran. Do you see it this way as well?
Well, you know, it's not a secret that the regime from its very inception had only one objective, and that was to export a radical ideology at the expense of its own people, and by means of proxies bring it about in the region and beyond. This started 46 years ago. Unfortunately, the fact that the regime was not pressed from the outside world and was allowed to continue this campaign of proxy wars led to unfortunate events that the latest victim of it was again the terrorist attack on October 7th by the proxy, this time of Hamas. And of course Hezbollah has been out there for decades now antagonizing Israel, certainly as instrument of the regime's aggression abroad. And that's no secret to any of us.
Yeah, but what we do feel are winds of change in the Middle East, in Syria and Lebanon today, in the funeral of Nasrallah and his successor, with Israeli planes flying overhead above the mourners, and even in Gaza, maybe with the help of the U.S. President Trump. If we add to that the fact that the Iranian regime was attacked by Israel, and you yourself said that Iran is weaker than it has ever been, and the protest that took place on Iran's Revolution Day on February 10th in Iran, is there an opportunity here? And is now the time?
Absolutely. I think that in more than 4 decades, this regime today is at its weakest that it's ever been. And at the same time, within Iran itself, there was never a time where Iranians themselves were most ready for that change. Today they're calling for an end to this regime. They need to understand that the only way to solve the problem ultimately and terminally is to put an end to this regime. Why? Because unlike this regime and its DNA of antagonism, the Iranian people, unlike the regime that is a warmonger, want to be part of the equation as peacemakers. We want to be at peace with our world, with our region. Iranians have no hostility or animosity to the Jewish state, to our Israeli friends and the Jews, or for that matter the Arabs or the Saudis or anybody else. That's why when I went to Jerusalem almost 2 years ago, one of the things I mentioned to the leadership there and other Israelis was, imagine if we had an elevation of the Abraham Accords to the Cyrus Accords, which would include Iran into that equation as a viable partner. This regime cannot change its behavior as it cannot change its DNA. What needs to happen is a change of regime, not because the outside world says so, but because the Iranian people want so. But once the regime is gone, any existential threat to Israel, any instability in the region, any threat coming by via funding terrorism or radicalism or whatever it is, including of course the nuclear threat, they will all evaporate at the same time. Now, there's a window of opportunity that we have right in front of us. Before there's an escalation of conflict, if the situation doesn't resolve itself by means of diplomacy. Meaning that together with external pressure in terms of maximum pressure approach that, of course, President Trump is pursuing, there needs to be parallel to that a policy of maximum support. So the Iranian people have an actual fair chance of overcoming the regime by bringing pressure from within.
That sounds like a very good plan. And you're saying that there's a window of opportunity. And so what do the world superpowers need to do to bring stability to the Middle East?
Well, the quickest way is to be gone with this regime. Why? Because the minute this regime is gone, you have the erasure of all the threatening aspect of this regime that is conducive to instability and conflict. You immediately have a change of pace where the focus now is for Iran to go through a transition phase while maintaining stability at home, but immediately engage with our regional strategic partners. Israel definitely is a key strategic partner for us. Hopefully we can work very well with the Saudis, with the Emiratis, but to immediately bring an element that reverses this whole cycle of instability that existed. We don't need to have superpowers to police our region anymore. Donald Trump, at the end of the day, is a businessman. He knows what's conducive to good business. But in order to get to that point, you have to have stability. So this regime has a corrupt paramilitary mafia that conducts every aspect of Iran's economy.
Wow.
How could you expect people to survive? They can barely afford to buy a kilo of potato. Forget about meat. They can't even afford that. How long do you think that's going to last? When we bring sanity, transparency, accountability, a free economy that is directly conducive to stable governance, and stable governance is conducive to a good economy. It's all as a result of that fundamental change that can occur in Iran. And I think we Iranians are prepared to do our part. What we need now is a partnership with the free world to stop their policy of appeasement and paying ransom for a regime that takes hostages to make a bargain in exchange.
So it is a matter of timing, and I think Israel is asking itself, is it the right time to attack Iran's nuclear facilities in order to do that, to get to that? And is this the way?
Again, this window of opportunity is such that before having to come to the threshold of having to intervene, albeit preemptively, to stop that threat, you have an opportunity to eradicate the regime once and for all, thereby not even having to engage militarily to secure our existential issues. The Iranian people would understand if Israel were to take the initiative. What they wouldn't understand is, why is the world waiting for? The last campaign that the regime launched was over $2.3 billion worth that could have been used to build schools and hospitals. They haven't used that for Iran. So I think the understanding is there. Therefore, I believe that somebody like Prime Minister Netanyahu, hopefully someone like Donald Trump, who today is well surrounded. I had meetings with his national security advisor, and I know Marco Rubio fairly well. I've met him many times. Perhaps the first American Secretary of State that gets it, that actually understands ever since the revolution. So I think the planets are aligning very well for us this time. That's a unique opportunity not to miss. It's not going to just change Iran and the Middle East. This is a game changer for the entire world. So we need to be much more on the same frequency here. And that's part of the reason I've been traveling within Europe and talking to the European side, who are much further behind the curve. They need to catch up to where we are right now.
It sounds like what you're saying makes so much sense. And I hear that you're in touch with Trump's people, but the question is, are you in contact with the American president? Are you collaborating? And do you intend to return to power?
Look, I've always said that my role today, and that's what the people of Iran trust me for and count on, is to be a leader of transition. We need to have a democratic transition from when we are today. And I've been offering a 5-point plan campaign as to how we get there. Between now and until the regime collapses, and after the collapse, how do we fill in the void and manage that transition? And this time the Iranian people will have a clear idea of the options available to them, and by means of a national referendum, they will vote and decide through the ballot box in a majority vote what they want.
With your permission, I would like to discuss the Munich Security Conference, the MSC, that has invited and then disinvited you twice at the behest of the German government. Under threat from the Islamic regime in Iran, you said the Ayatollah is pulling the strings in Berlin. Is Germany afraid of the Ayatollah regime? Is that the case?
Look, I started my recent European trip in Paris here about 10-12 days ago. From there I went to London, from there to Munich, from there to Geneva, and back here in Paris. A French senator was telling me last week that we have become hostages to our hostages. How long are you going to be pursuing a policy of appeasement or pay ransom for a regime that takes hostages as a means to blackmail the world? Is this what the free world is supposed to stand for? You are basically stabbing us in the back. You are basically silencing the voice of millions of Iranians who are no different in terms of value and aspiration than a German citizen or a French citizen or a British citizen. The problem is that you still think that the Iranians are not the solution, but the regime can offer you this time a different path. After 46 years, you still haven't learned the lesson. And in the meantime, the clock is ticking. In the meantime, we're approaching the threshold. And by the time everybody realizes, it may be too late. So wake up, catch up to where we are, use this opportunity. It's good for us, it's good for you. The only loser is the Islamic regime. Anything short of that, we lose, you lose, they win. A choice has to be made, and the choice has to be made now.
Very powerful words. In a few weeks, you will celebrate, all the Iranians will celebrate their Nowruz. So we want to wish freedom to the Iranian people. Your Highness, thank you so much for this interview. May our next interview be in Tehran. I'll come see you there.
We hope so too. A liberated country that can finally breathe and join the ranks of free nations. Thank you.